This is note-taking guide 11, actually 12.2 for Math 2. We're going to multiply matrices today. So this front part right here reminds us of what we need to do in order to decide whether or not matrices can be multiplied together. We're going to look at the dimensions of the matrices, remembering that matrices are named by their rows and then by their columns. Rows go left and right, columns go up and down. So if we had a matrix that's the size of 1 by 4 and a matrix that is a 4 by 4, if these two middle numbers are the same, it tells us we can multiply them together, and these outside two numbers tell me the size of my answer. So here's an example where they show us how to multiply the matrices together, and you're welcome to look through this and see how you can figure it out, but I want to just move on to the example and show you how to do it. I think it's easiest to maybe show you and have you learn at the same time. So the first thing I want to do is I want to label these matrices and their sizes so that I can decide whether or not they can be multiplied together. This has 2 rows, so I know that the first part of my dimension is going to be 2. And then this has 2 columns, so I know that this is a 2 by 2 matrix. So that's how we decide the rows and the columns, is by the rows and then the columns. The dimensions come from there. So this one also is a 2 by 2 matrix because of the 2 rows and the 2 columns. These two middle numbers are the same, so I know I can multiply it together. These two back numbers tell me the size of my answer. So my answer has to be a 2 by 2 matrix. When I draw this 2 by 2 matrix, I like to label it as row 1, row 2, column 1, and column 2. And I do that because it helps me to figure out where my answers are supposed to be coming from. So I want to now find the first answer that goes into my matrix, and I'm going to do that right here. To find this, I would have to do row 1 and column 1 together. That's what I'm trying to find. So I would use row 1 of the first matrix, which is right here, and column 1 of the second matrix, which is this. And then I kind of just like to draw out to the side and write my notes for what I'm doing. I'm doing row 1 and column 1. When I do row 1 and column 1, I'm going to do the first number, which is 2, times the first number, which is 6. So 2 times 6 is 12. And then I'm going to do the second number, which is 3, times the second number, which is -4. Those multiply to be a -12. And then I'm going to add those together. So 12 plus -12 is 0. That's the first number in my matrix. Now, in order to find the next number in my matrix, I'm going to have to use different rows and different columns. So let's take a look at what I need to use this time in order to find my rows and my columns. So to find this answer, I would use this answer over here. I would use row 1 and column 2. So I need to go and I need to grab row 1, which is right here, and column 2, which is right here, and I'm going to multiply first numbers together. So row 1 and column 2, here's my work for that. I'm going to go 2 times 2, which is 4. And I'm going to add to that 3 times 3, which is 9. Those add together to be 13, so my answer for that spot is 13. To find this next value right here that I'm looking for, I would have to do row 2 times column 1 in order to do that. So I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to find my row 2 and my column 1. So row 2 is right here. Column 1 is right here. Again, I go first number times first number, so that would be a -6. So I'm doing row 2, column 1. I'd have a -6, and then going to add that to a -12. So those add together to be a -18 for the number that comes into that spot right there. The last spot that I'm trying to find comes from doing row 2 times column 2, and I can tell that from looking right here, this position comes from row 2 and column 2. So I use row 2 of the first matrix, column 2 of the second matrix, and then I use the numbers. So a -1 times 2 would be a -2. 3 times 3 would be 9. I add those together to get the number 7. So there's your first example of how to multiply matrices together. Let's try it again. Okay, so the very first thing I have to do is I have to label my dimensions of my matrix. This is a 1 by 3. This one is a 3 by 2. Because these middle terms are the same, I know I can multiply them. The outside numbers tell me the size of my answer. My answer is going to be a 1 by 2, which means I have one row and I have 2 columns. So I used all of that up there to just tell me the size of my answer. Once I know the size of my answer, it becomes pretty simple to just do that multiplication. So again, this position right here comes from row 1 times column 1. So I need to find row 1, which is actually this whole matrix, times column 1, which is right here, and I'm going to multiply similar positions together. So the first one times the first one would be 2. The second one times the second one would be 4. And the third one times the third one would be 0. Those all three add together to be 6 for the first position in my matrix. And then I would do my second position in my matrix. My second position in my matrix is found by doing row 1 and column 2. So row 1 again is the entire matrix. Column 2 is that second column in that matrix. And I'm going to multiply those together position by position. So first spot and first spot to get 10. Second spot and second spot to get 4. And third spot with third spot to get 0. Those add together to be 14. So the solution to my matrix multiplication is the matrix 6 and 14. Let's try one more and see what happens. This is a 2 by 1. This is a 3 by 1. These middle terms are not the same, therefore I cannot multiply this and my answer would be the empty set or no solution. Thanks for watching this note-taking guide. Good luck on your homework.